Hey everyone, Robert here, author of Expansion Mastery, the practical guide to living a fully engaged life. Are you ready to start living your life to the fullest? Are you ready and willing to do what it takes to transform yourself and your life from ordinary to extraordinary, even in the most of insane times? Welcome, my friends, to the Fully Engaged Life. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Yes, I know, things just seem to be getting crazier out there, don't they? But keep this in mind. They may be able to limit our liberties and freedoms, at least temporarily. But they cannot prevent us from working on ourselves. They cannot prevent us from going inside and bettering ourselves through meditative practices and meditation. They cannot do that unless we allow it. And one of the biggest mistakes people make is giving into the fear. The fear puts us in a position where it's very difficult to work on ourselves and to continue our spiritual expansion. And that is what's needed right now. And if you have to question who they are, then you are not paying attention. And the things that we see transpiring are not that unusual for humanity. For thousands upon thousands of years, things just like this have been happening. My wife and I do a lot of reading and studying about various histories throughout the world, and we get to see this typical human behavior. And why does this happen? Why do human beings act this way? Because we lack awakening. If we attain spiritual expansion, if we awaken, that would stop this cycle of destruction and violence. However, we know that the one constant in life is change. So things are always going to be in a state of change. Right now, we see the United States at a point where the American culture is being systematically dismantled and overthrown. We can see a similar situation happening in Canada. And this Western culture is being taken down, and it is meant to be replaced with a socialist, communist, global regime. And this is simply what's happening. Open your eyes, look around. You can see this going on. And it's not just here in the U.S. and Canada, but we would be kind of the hot spots for that, I think. It's happening in many places in the West as this sort of prosperous, free living is being destroyed. So it's very important that we awaken. So in these troubling times, what can we do? What does all of that have to do with spirituality? Well, everything. It speaks to one of the things that I stress in my book, which is to have a warrior spirit. You have to have that warrior spirit, right? I talk a lot about being a spiritual warrior. And while that may seem as though those two words are at odds with one another, I assure you they aren't. If you are weak, you will fail on the spiritual path. It takes a great amount of inner strength for us to be able to walk along the spiritual path and attain spiritual expansion. I've said repeatedly that it is not for the faint of heart. And as I continue on my own spiritual expansion, my own spiritual journey, I stand by that more resolutely than ever before. And now, of course, we have external turmoil making it increasingly difficult for us to work on ourselves. So what I would like to offer you today is 7 virtues that we could and should adopt in order to help us develop the strength that we need in order to continue moving forward with our spiritual expansion. Are you ready? Okay, number 1, authenticity. Now, within authenticity lies integrity, morality, and sincerity. We need to develop our own moral compass. And then the willingness to stand behind that leads us to integrity. Above all else, we must remain true to ourselves. And this is the idea of authenticity. That is why we need integrity, morality, and a sense of sincerity. And these things need to emulate outward. People need to recognize that we are a person of integrity, that we have solid moral standards, and that if they come to us, they know, they can trust that any of our interactions together will come from a place of sincerity, from having a sincere heart. So in order to have this sense of authenticity, we need to have integrity. We need to be very clear on what we are and are not willing to accept from ourselves and in our lives. And then we cannot compromise or sacrifice our sense of personal integrity. Now, when it comes to sincerity, when someone speaks to us, they need to be able to trust that we are speaking to them from our own feelings, our own thoughts. And we don't include beliefs here because beliefs are not part of sincerity because they're not real. They're a fabrication of the mind. So we have to make sure that in order to be sincere and hold this virtue, we have to truly speak and act from our own thoughts, feelings, and from our heart. This idea of sincerity includes having an honest mind. What does that mean? This refers to having a mind that is free of the hypocrisy caused by the ego. It means that we are able to connect to our genuine feelings, and there's a sense of purity to everything we do, and that we are expanding from our center. Because it is through this expansion from our center that allows us to access our maximum and true capacity as human beings. So with all of these virtues, we can see that they have to start within us and we have to embody them. They have to benefit us first. If they're not benefiting us, then they're not benefiting anyone else because all of this expands outward from our center, see? So we have to hold this sense of sincerity within our heart. We have to have an unwavering, immovable sense of integrity and morality. And this then allows us to make clear, concise decisions that we can commit to fully. And only once we have established that within ourselves, for ourselves, then it will emulate outward. It will expand from our interactions with others, and then it will benefit them, and it will benefit the greater good of humanity. Number 2 is respect. With this, we have to first understand that we must respect ourselves. We have to respect ourselves before we can truly respect anyone else. So once again, once we find this sense of self-respect and we hold that, then we are able to truly have a sense of respect for those around us. This then results in a sense of mutual respect. Think about that for a moment. What if we had a sense of mutual respect for one another? All people in the world. Can you imagine what that world would look like? How incredible could it be? But it takes a sense of strength to respect ourselves and to respect others. So respect has a great deal to do with developing strength. And this is a balanced sense of strength. As we become stronger inside and out, we seem to become more courteous and tolerant of others around us. And this is sort of a byproduct, if you will, of respect. Respect should be part of every interaction. It should be the base of every interaction we have together as human beings. Although we can see the lack of respect today with all of the violent protests going on in the U.S. and other places, with the incredible amount of property destruction, we need to have a healthy sense of respect for one another in all of the facets of the individual. Their property, their privacy, their personal ideas, whatever it is. And we need to have a sense of respect for nature. We have to respect our true parents, that of heaven and earth, and refrain from any acts that would be considered disrespectful. When we are in a state where we lack respect, we have disconnected from our higher self and have embraced the ego and all of the evil and defilements that it can contain. When we have the strength of respect, it shows, especially when times are tough, because we will be able to hold our composure, have a sense of control over our emotions, and exhibit levels of respect, even in the most challenging and difficult of situations and times. Number 3 is honor. Yes, honor. Wow. That's not something that's very popular right now in the West, is it? There isn't much of a sense of honor amongst people. And this is truly something that we are lacking. Humanity needs to hold a sense of honor within its heart. We face things instead of hiding from them. When it comes to spiritual practices, we face ourselves. We face our flawed nature in order to improve. No, it's not easy, but we're able to do that. We face any difficult situation, even if it means accepting the blame for something that went wrong. This is honor. We don't lie, cheat, steal, loot, or act in other dishonorable ways. We have to stand for something, and we have to be willing to fight for it when we know it is right. Only in this way do we become capable of taking our stance in the world. What's that saying? Maybe it's a line in a song. If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. Honor means embracing our true nature and remaining true to it, and to uphold any decisions we make with an immovable mind and a sincere, immovable heart. Number 4 is compassion and charity. It is said that on the spiritual path, as we engage in meditation and attain wisdom, it must be tempered with compassion. It's all about balance. The stronger we get, the more compassionate we should become as well. This keeps our heart and mind in balance. And compassion can be a tricky thing because it isn't always just giving in and giving someone their way. It isn't just giving them what they think they want. Compassion is really about the capability to give someone what they need, and that may be different than what they want. This is clearly illustrated in the old phrase about give a man a fish he eats for a day, teach that man how to fish, and he eats for a lifetime. We have to really think deeply about that and understand that that is a statement about real compassion. And of course, along with this is a sense of charity. To share a personal experience, when I would travel to Japan and train with my sword teacher, he was a very strong person. He held an incredible sense of integrity, sincerity, respect, honor, compassion, and he was tough as nails. There's no question about that. And yet, every day, he and his family got up and they would make meals for the elderly people in his area. Now, keep in mind, at this point, he himself was in his late 70s, around 80. And they would make these meals, and they would deliver these meals to people who were too old to go out shopping, too old to go out and get around, and they would help them. I was with him once where we even put on a show at a local nursing home for the people there, which they do every year. They put on a sword demonstration and do some no theater type of plays, and my sword teacher sings. He's actually a wonderful singer, and he just did all of this out of the goodness of his heart, just to be charitable and to respect the elderly in his area. It's really a wonderful thing to do, isn't it? And I was so honored to be asked to be part of that. Strangely, today, things like compassion and charity are viewed by many as weaknesses, and indeed they are absolutely not. It takes great strength to be compassionate and charitable, especially compassionate, because you may want to help somebody by giving them what they think they want, and maybe sometimes that is what they need. But other times, we have to make the hard choice to give them what they actually need, and that can be tough at the time. But that's the strength required for true compassion. Number 5 is honesty. This is something else we see greatly lacking in the world. And again, it is often falsely perceived as a weakness. Honesty is a strength. Sometimes it's very hard to be honest. And one of the most difficult forms of honesty that there is to be honest with ourselves. Once you become mindful of this, you might be a little shocked to find out just how much you lie to yourself every single day. Much of the time, we lie to ourselves in order to protect the ego and continue to feel good. In other words, if somebody tells us that something we're wearing doesn't look good, then instantaneously, the ego starts to go to work and create a story about how you really do look good and they just don't know what they're talking about. And, you will justify what you're wearing. You'll justify everything through that. And this is one of the ways, a very simplistic example there for you, but it's one of the ways in which we are completely dishonest with ourselves. And we have to learn to be honest with ourselves before we can develop the strength to be honest with others, because it takes a tremendous amount of inner strength to be honest with ourselves. But then we also have the difficulty of being honest with others. Sometimes it can inadvertently cause them to feel that same way, where they get upset or unhappy because you give them an honest answer. It may be something they actually need to hear, but yet it can still be difficult. So it takes strength on our part to be honest with others, and it takes strength on the part of others to hear that honesty. So this is an incredibly important virtue here, and it needs to be worked on and developed, because you'd probably be a little surprised to find out how much that has slidden, even though you might consider yourself to be an honest person. And then, of course, we need to be honest in anything that we do, any of our business dealings, any of our interactions with other people. We should always strive for honesty. And so often, being honest is a very difficult thing to do. Now, that doesn't mean we always just say the honest truth and, allow it to hurt people's feelings. That is not the objective here. Sometimes it's better to remain quiet, right? If you don't have something good to say, don't say anything at all. That way you don't have to be dishonest. And this is a strategy that we can employ. But we do have to develop a sense of honesty. And most importantly, where it starts is becoming honest with ourselves. If we make a promise or a commitment, we have to stick to that to the very best of our ability. We have to follow through with that. We have to be careful that we are not making empty promises or empty gestures. So this actually causes us to be a little bit more cautious before we give our word. Because if we give our word, we have to have every intention of following through. Number 6 is a sense of loyalty. We have to have a sense of loyalty. We have to hold a sense of loyalty for ourselves. And by that I mean we have to be loyal to our authentic self. We have to be crystal clear on what we are willing to accept and what we are not willing to accept in our lives. We have to then decide who and where we place our loyalty. Loyalty should not be blind. It should be well-deserved, and it should be well considered. We should be loyal to our spouse. I have an undying sense of loyalty to my beautiful wife, a sense of loyalty that is unwavering in every way, and I will always, always have her back. Loyalty also speaks to taking full responsibility for your actions, for anything you do in life. And that includes the acceptance of any consequences from anything you say, anything you think, anything you do. This is about staying true to those you care about and to those who depend on you. One way to begin the development of loyalty is to be loyal to the practices that you are engaging in, whether they are physical practices such as Tai Chi or lifting weights or doing some aerobic exercise or yoga, or your spiritual practices. You need to pick some practices and stay loyal to those. A lot of times I see people who lack a sense of loyalty will jump from one thing to another, to another, to another, and they never engage in one thing long enough to actually benefit from it. But in doing so, by picking an exercise that we know has great value and sticking with that, we start to develop the base for loyalty. Loyalty also speaks to a sense of selflessness, where we are able to put others before ourselves in certain situations. On occasion, my sword teacher in Japan would ask me to take certain vows and make a promise to him. And these were always to do with a sense of loyalty. One such thing, without going into a lot of detail, revolved around not mixing any of the various martial arts schools that he was teaching me. I would keep each one individual because he was teaching me several different schools. And it was important to him that each school maintains its own individuality, its own identity, and that I don't do something to mix them with other schools like many other teachers do. Of course, I agreed, and that was many, many, many years ago, pushing 2 decades or more now, and I still remain fiercely loyal to that commitment I made, to that promise that I made to him, and I will remain so for the rest of my life. So, in order to develop loyalty, we have to be willing to accept 100% responsibility for everything we think, say, and do. We need to be able to fulfill anything we commit to. We need to be able to be trustworthy and uphold anything that we agree to do. And we must be willing to fulfill any promise that we make. That brings us to number 7, which is courage. And as I stated in the very beginning, the spiritual path requires a tremendous amount of courage and strength. We must have the courage to face all of our flaws, and the ego doesn't like us to do that. But we must have the courage and strength to do so. We must have the courage to learn things and master things that we don't know. We must have the courage to step outside of our comfort zone in order to truly live our lives. We must have the courage to love, and to love unconditionally requires more courage than about anything else you could do, because that is always when we are at our most vulnerable. Anything worth having, anything worthwhile requires a sense of courage. We have to be willing to take risks, because if we are not stepping outside of our comfort zone, then we are not capable of living a fully engaged life. I cannot stress strongly enough to all of you just how important courage is to living a fully engaged life. Today, with everything going on, we see how much courage that it takes to stand up for what we know is right, and to speak out for what we know is right. It takes great courage, and we have to embrace the fact that it takes a great deal of courage just to live life. Authenticity requires courage. Honesty requires courage. Compassion requires courage. I think you see where I'm going with this. We must develop the courage to do whatever is necessary for the situation. We must have the courage to love openly and unconditionally. And equally, we must have the courage to fight for that which we know is right. This is the balance that we are looking to attain. This gives you a glimpse into the heart and mind of the spiritual warrior. So please take some time to contemplate these 7 virtues. And while I have presented a somewhat spiritual view of these 7 virtues here, it should be known that these are the virtues often associated and embraced by the samurai as the code of Bushido. And as these virtues are designed to help cultivate a strong, healthy mind and heart, each one deserves great consideration. It can simply not be denied that these 7 virtues must be embraced and embodied in order to live a fully engaged life. Please make sure that you are sharing all of the podcasts with your friends and family so that they can get real, authentic spiritual teachings and hopefully some things that benefit them in many ways in their life. And don't forget to visit me at www.expansionmastery.com. Get your autographed copy of Expansion Mastery there. You can get the newly revised and expanded ebook, Reinventing Yourself Through Realignment. You can check out the blog posts and all kinds of interesting things there. Please make sure and hit the subscribe, like, share, comment, all of that stuff as well on social media, as that helps a lot, especially when they're shadow banning us and preventing us from advertising and things. So anything that you can do helps, and those of you who are doing so, I do take note of it, and I appreciate it greatly. Thank you very much. Until next time, I love all of you guys, and I wish you the very best in your practices and your life. Take care.